Welcome to Remix EQ Live, where we're amplifying equity with a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Tate, and today I'm broadcasting live from Savannah, Georgia, where I live. And for those who are joining us today, please drop a greeting of choice in the comments. Hello, how you doing? What's up? Let us know where you are joining from and the equity work that you do or you aspire to do. And remember, Remix EQ Live is an experience that's meant to be shared. So I encourage you to hit the share and invite buttons and bring along your people, your network, your family, your friends, your peeps to join our Remix EQ community today. And while those comments are flowing in and those invitations are flowing out, I want to remind you that Remix EQ Live offers the opportunity for us to connect and build community with each other around the equity work being performed throughout the world. And we do this by centering the work. That is, our guests and viewers share examples of what they do in their role or position as a way to illustrate the innovative and effective ways they advance equity in the spaces in which they live, work, and play. So, throughout the show and in the comments, I invite you to share what you do to make the world a more just place. Now, today is the first interview show of Remix EQ Live Season 3. And today I'm interviewing Dr. Tracey Benson, who is the founder and lead consultant of Tracey A. Benson Consulting, the founder of the Anti-Racist Leadership Institute, and co-author of Unconscious Bias in Schools, a developmental approach to exploring race and racism. And today's conversation centers race and racism as we discuss the development of anti-racist leaders in education. So, Remix EQ community, let us begin this conversation for a change. Dr. Tracey Benson, I invite you to introduce yourself to us. And as you do, please share any career twists and turns that have led you to your current role.
I'm trying to match energy this morning. Thank you, Dr. Tate. I haven't had my coffee yet, but I feel awake now. I appreciate the invitation. We go way back to Western Massachusetts, where we met on a whim when you were doing some contract work in the small town of Williamstown, Massachusetts. And so I'm glad to be back with you again, and I appreciate you inviting me on to talk about my work. In short, I'm a career practitioner. I started out my career as a pre-K teacher. Um, I planned on going into education. I tried to find a window in because I was a sociology major, and so I joined Teach for America because I knew I wanted to be a teacher. Right. Started out in pre-K, did that for a short while because that was not my grade level. Was then moved to fourth grade to be a math and science teacher. That is my niche. I love being math and science. I love fourth grade, and I'm gonna finish my career going back to the classroom and being a fourth grade teacher because I just love that age and I love teaching math and science. Um, I stayed in education in the classroom in support roles for a few years, and then was recommended from one of my department heads that I might want to consider leadership. And so, on her recommendation, and just as a sort of a experiment, I went and got my master's in school administration and tried it out for a little bit. I liked it. I'm more quantitative minded. I like doing data. I like working with kids. I like working with teachers, and so I stayed in administration for 5 years in middle school. I was middle school AP for 3 years, 6 years, and a high school principal for another 3 years before I went back for my doctorate. And I had planned to be a superintendent. I was growing in my leadership. I did some really good work at the school level, had planned on getting my doctorate and then going on to being a superintendent. But during my time in my doctorate, I noticed that there was a woeful inadequacy of work around anti-racism in education, right? We all understand structural racism really affects Black students and Black communities, but there's not a lot of research about how it plays out within our contemporary society. And so I decided I want to be the change I wanted to see in the world. And so instead of going to superintendent route, I became an academic on a tenure track at University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And that's when this book came about. I got invited to the project from my co-author, Sarah Fireman. And I also did research and still do research on structural racism. What does that look like? What are the effects on students and how do we interrupt these trends? Um, and as a part of sort of thinking about a partner to the book, because folks The book sold really well. People liked the book. They felt like it was written for leaders. It's written for leaders by leaders, right? And so folks liked the book. They wanted to know how they can learn more. And so that's when I founded the Anti-Racist Leadership Institute. And it's been around. We've been around for about 2 years. We've served hundreds and hundreds of leaders from all around the world at this point, specifically focused on student outcomes. And so I love the work that I do. And I didn't plan on being an independent consultant when I first started out, but I think the past has led me here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. First, I love that you started as a pre-K
I did.
teacher. As a mom of a pre-Ker. That's really exciting. But I love that you shared your journey on the show. We really like to normalize the twists and turns in careers and in life. And we always appreciate when educators come on to share that there are many different ways that you can contribute and influence the education space. And so your twists and turns throughout your journey have definitely showed us of that. And I love that you're gonna like end your career back with fourth grade math and science. Yay! Oh, we have Dr. Kathy Anderson, who was one of our first guests on the show. She says, hi, she's excited to be here today. She's Dr. Anderson. She's a pediatrician from North Dakota, where education on this topic is much needed. And she says, thanks, Dr. Benson, for speaking on this incredibly important topic for all our children and communities. Yay! Love it. So for those who are just joining us, this is Remix EQ Live, where we are amplifying equity through a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. And now that you've had the chance to meet or reconnect with Dr. Tracey Benson, I know that you are inviting others to tune in. And of course, I invite you to participate, to interact with us. Post comments to say hello. Let us know that you are here. Ask questions. Share examples from your experiences and your learnings from the show or throughout your life. As we dive into this interview, you are part of this Remix EQ live experience and you are part of this Remix EQ community. So now we center the work. This is an opportunity for us to learn from Dr. Benson about his perspectives and approaches for developing anti-racist leaders in schools and educational organizations. So Dr. Benson, in your role as founder and lead consultant of Tracey A. Benson Consulting and as the founder of the Anti-Racist Leadership Institute, how are you addressing race and racism with educational leaders?
Yeah, our approach actually grew out of frustration on my end. Because in the space of the DEI space, which we don't do DEI, very purposefully, we do anti-racism, right? Because DEI has been a phrase that everyone's doing equity, everyone has a DEI statement or something, but yet when it asked how it manifests in terms of outcomes for Black and Brown communities or Black and Brown kids, it's often hard to describe, right? In terms of what adult actions are leading to changes in student outcomes. And so since DEI has been so watered down, we don't do DEI, we do anti-racism. But the frustration came was when I noticed there were a lot of folks in this space who focused in on a purely adult behaviors, where the know better, do better paradigm, that if adults know better, hence they're going to do better, and magic's going to happen, and kids are going to be going to perform better. And so seeing the dearth of consultants who do this work, not saying that's not important work, conscious awareness raising is very important work. So I don't want to put that on the side to say that's not important, but it's the frustration that it doesn't always lead to outcomes for Black and Brown kids, right? And as a father right now of a son who's turning 21 in 2 days, and a new daughter, a daughter who's now 19 months, who's going to go through the school system again. So I've been through that as a parent, as a practitioner, as a leader, and I felt that there needed to be resources where we help leaders actualize changes for Black and Brown kids. So that's where we start. That if you're going to be an anti-racist leader, we must first start with the end in mind. What is the changes within our students? What is the problem that our organization is experiencing in our service model that's not serving Black and Brown kids? And that's where we're different, right? It's because when we start with the end in mind, we then build their leadership capacity, the infrastructure, the conscious and awareness raising, the data cycles, and everything that goes into changing the culture and the ways in which schools function. It's specifically aimed at a student outcome, right? And in my belief, in my epistemology and understanding, is that is the most effective way for solving some of our most perennial problems in education when it comes to serving Black and Brown communities.
Oh, that's great. I love how you underscore that the focus is on students and student outcomes. And so even though you are, working with adults and you are changing their awareness, changing their practice, it's in benefit or for the benefit of students and changing, I like that, like the service model, right, of schools, right? They are in service to students and families in order to do that. And with this very defined focus on anti-racism, I think it brings clarity to the work, and it brings clarity to the outcomes that teachers and leaders and and families and communities are trying to work toward. Um, I wanted to celebrate your authorship. So we're always very excited when we have authors come on the show. And so Dr. Benson has co-authored the book Unconscious Bias in Schools, a developmental approach to exploring race and racism. And I always start by asking, like, what motivated you to write this book, and then who will benefit from reading it?
Right. So fortunately, I was invited to the project. So it's just, twists and turns. I was the teaching fellow for Sarah Fireman during my doctoral program. She was teaching the lead professor in the school administration program, and myself and Dr. Cesar Cruz, we were her two TFs together. And we did the majority of the racial equity work, the conversations, the workshops, on behalf of the teaching team. And so and Sarah and I had a lot of conversations around how to incorporate racial equity into the curriculum. And so after I graduated, I think it was only 6 months after, she invited me to the project because she'd written an article for some publication, and then there was an offer from a press to say, "We'd like your article. It got lots of attention. We'd like you to write a book." And so she had the wherewithal to understand that only her perspective as a white woman it was not enough. She needed someone who was opposite from her, different from her, and someone that she trusted. So I was invited to the project, and I happily accepted because I was on the tenure track. So I had the bandwidth to do it, and I knew the person I was going to be writing the book with. And our intent from the beginning was to write a book that we would have wanted to have as principles, right? And we talk about a lot of our story in the book about things that we did that were effective and things where we just didn't do enough around anti-racism. And my biggest Achilles heel when I did the work, I think was good work as a school leader, was I never directly addressed the concept of racism in those words and terms. I brought in an outside provider to aid me in doing that, but I never gained the ability and the dexterity when I was in the seat of principalship to do it myself, right? And so we wanted to build at least give a book that's a roadmap on how to sort of start the process of building this capacity at the school level for folks to think about their capacity and how to then, I mean, one, think about where they are in terms of their capacity, but also who to seek out in terms of support to bring their work and making it functional within their schoolhouses and in their districts. And so, our hope, and it's been relatively popular, and our hope it continues to be a resource for leaders who need an aid in how to go down the road of anti-racism.
Yeah. No, I've had the opportunity to read via listening. And it's really great. And I think I was sharing with right before the show. One thing is that especially when I was listening and like as I'm driving or doing things around the house, I felt that I was like eavesdropping on your conversation with Dr. Sarah Fireman. And it was both like the dialogue that you guys were having together about racialized experiences that were happening in your school communities or have happened in your school communities in the past, but also the inner dialogue that you all were having about the conversation. And I thought that one, it made visible for us, the readers, like common frustrations, hurt, exhaustion that happens in these conversations, especially these interracial conversations that center race and racism. But also, there are many like ahas and learnings that like, you express or described how it changed your practice, right? And what you did differently in your school communities. And it's great because it's definitely, I'm going to say, it's definitely written with a practitioner in mind. So there's not only these conversations and these dialogues between you and your co-author, but also we get to like certain schools kind of like hear the conversations that like staff are having with each other or that teachers are having with the principals, but there's examples and there's like discussions of protocols, discussions of checklists. So there really are these actionable things that you have in there that I think are beneficial to um, beneficial to practitioners. So I appreciate it. I encourage the Remix community to buy Dr. Benson's and Fireman's book, Unconscious Bias in Schools, A Developmental Approach to Exploring Race and Racism. So read it, listen to it, learn from it, and definitely apply it. It's a great read. All right.
And it's very thin too.
Yeah.
So we wrote it for principals and superintendents who don't have a lot of time, right? And so each chapter is between 15 and 17 pages long. It's only 10 chapters, very short, hopefully digestible, and very thin. And so, instead of writing an expansive sort of volume, which can happen, we wrote it specifically for practitioners who don't have a lot of time.
No, and it reads as that. So it's wonderful. This is great. Oh, all right. We have Sheila Mary Koch, or Coke. She's joining today from Nayarit, Mexico. All right. Oh, look at this. We're global again. She just stepped back into a part-time teaching role in the community after 4 years of reporting on education and working hard on the personal front. And she's hoping that this will enable her to come from a more educated space to serve kids and adults. Well, welcome or bienvenidos to our show. We appreciate you joining. Yay! All right. So I'd love, you talked a little bit about it in the beginning, but I'd love for you to share, Dr. Benson, in your experience as both an educational leader and your work with school leaders. What are some common challenges or missteps among schools engaged in equity or DEI work?
Well, I think the biggest common mistake is not starting with the end in mind, right? I see this time and time. It's like a bad movie, that movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. We've been doing this for so long, and with so many different schools and school districts, that we see the same common mistakes, right? And this isn't a sort of a trend that we see in education across different areas of professional development, right? Is that we expect that if we provide some know-how, conscious awareness raising, and a moderate level of new knowledge for adults, that they're going to be able to translate that into practice. That's not always the case in any realm of professional development, but especially in the area of anti-racism, right? Because along with having to understand and increase your intellectual capacity, you have to build your dexterity for managing the emotions involved. There are a lot of emotions when it comes to reconciling your internalized racism, and recognizing that they may play out and act out in the classroom unintentionally, but that the ways in which systems continue to oppress Black and Brown students is because the adults within the system have unintentional practices that are based in sort of learned racism that are unrealized and haven't been reconciled yet to really change the tide around understanding how we can have to do things differently to realize different outcomes, and accepting that if we have overrepresentation of Black students in special education, or high numbers of uses of exclusionary discipline among Black and Brown communities, that is a design of the system and the adults within the system. It's not just a byproduct of communities. And we often hear, when it comes to why do these phenomena exist, we often hear folks talk about it through a deficit lens, right? It starts at home. It's from the communities they're from. Oh, they come from a low-income background. Hence, they're bringing these problems to our school, rather than realizing the school is the main place that produce these outcomes in our students. And that's a very different understanding about the agencies that schools and school districts have to reverse these trends if we take the responsibility for producing them. And so, what I believe, that if a school district right now at the moment, someone in a leadership position, or even in a teacher position, that folks can be tempered radicals within the organization. And what that means is anyone can step forward and take leadership. You don't have to be a superintendent. You don't have to be a principal. You don't have to be an AP to take leadership. You could be a teacher in a classroom with a different epistemology and want to implement this among your class, amongst your team, and then spread it throughout the school, with if you have the will and the want to do that work. But for anyone who's listening to this, to me right now, talk about the major misstep, what they can do today, going back to their school or organization that claims to be have a DEI plan or be anti-racist, whatever the case may be, and has a series of learning opportunities or a series of things that they're doing in service of this, is to pause the conversation and ask two simple questions, right? To see how effective we're being in affecting student outcomes. One is, how are the initiatives? What's in it for kids specifically? How are we improving the lives for Black and Brown students within our school? What's in it for kids? And then if there's an answer, which there may or may not be. The second question is, how do we know? How are we measuring that? And this is a popular practice that we change our curriculum, right, to be more racially representative. Okay, all right. What's in it for kids? How is it improving them? And how are we measuring it, right? And if you're just feeling good from adult actions without the answers to those questions, we're not affecting student outcomes. We're just doing diet white supremacy rather than anti-racism.
Yeah. So many great points in there. But I appreciate like the point that in our schools that like the racism is designed and then that the adults are contributing or perpetuating it, and then that but then also underscoring like that they have agency, right? Like they have power to change, and then empowering anyone within the organization to step up and do this work. And I appreciate those two questions about what's in it for kids and how do we know, like for this work, like if you can keep those front of mind, it might change the what you choose to do, what you choose to talk about, and how what kind of aspect or challenge you choose to tackle. So and that was like actually my next question was around this, because one of the aspects of your book was really that of course these conversations are really important, they're critical to this work, and the way that you do them is very important, with care and with respect, and with this I love how you talk in the book like this endurance to stay in the discomfort, but you also like push for school communities to do inquiry and to investigate and examine what's happening in school and to look at data. And you had several examples like around, discipline and achievement, but even the participation of students in after school program and what the racial makeup looks like that. Or there was an example with where students were seated and who was raising their hand and contributing to the conversation. And all that is data, and all that is information that either made visible bias, unconscious bias, or some of the inequities that were happening. And it was, I just appreciate it because sometimes, right, it's like, oh, we just want racism to go away. We just don't want to be racist, and we want everyone to feel really good. And there's not a lot of like examples about how you measure that change, and by the setting up and pushing people to do that inquiry, and that there is all this different types of data to look at within a school, I thought could be very empowering for teachers, and even for those and leaders, but even for those who are going to step into that role because nobody else is. They can start with their own classroom, or they can start with their own school. But so, and you talk about this, I want to know, like, what are your two measurable outcomes that indicate how well educational leaders are addressing unconscious bias or enacting anti-racist practices in their schools?
Thank you. Thank you for that. And it's not really direct in terms of it changes from leader to leader, right? So if we're working with a particular school or school district, the first part of our work together is identifying a problem of practice. Like, what are you working on, right? We're not just coming in with a set of sort of reading a book and a set of terms and having conversations, making people feel guilty and shameful about working through our process of emotions and then leaving. We don't do that work. The work we do is like, all right, identify the measurable, what's the problem, right? And how are we measuring our baseline, right? So if you're saying that we're here to stem the overrepresentation of Black boys in special education, what are the numbers? What does it look like? Where are they being referred to most within your school system? For what reason are they being referred? How long do they stay on their IEP? At what point are you exiting them? So what does the pipeline look like that has put it forth that you're saying this is a problem, right? Because most of the observations are anecdotal without having a very clear sense of what is the problem quantitatively. What does it look like? So we can know where we're going to set benchmarks. So that could be an indicator that you're doing it effective if you know what's actually happening in your district, right? I'm working with a superintendent out in California, and they want to stem the dropout rates of Black and brown students. And so we've been working on this for about 3 months, right? Because they don't have the data infrastructure to really understand what's happening. When are students dropping out? Why are they dropping out? What did their education look like through elementary, middle school, high school? Like, so at what point in time did they become cooled out of education, right? They're just making speculations. And their answer has been to implement a sort of a credit recovery program in the 11th and 12th grade, but it hasn't been working, right? Students are still dropping out because they haven't done a root cause analysis. And so a marker of a really highly effective anti-racist leader is, you spend the time doing a landscape analysis of having a very good sense and an objective idea about what's happening in your district right now. And then the second aspect of a highly effective anti-racist leader is, um, and this is sort of the self work, to understand intrinsically that it's not everybody else around you, right? We often, I know as a leader, it's really easy to get into the mindset that, well, if these teachers just change, if those people, if those kids just change, if they just change those systems out there, then everything will be better. But I can essentially stay the same in the way in which I function. They just need to change out there. And so this is not something that can be measured, but it's an understanding that as a leader of the school building, you're not just a part of the problem, that you are the problem. The ways in which you interface with your organization, how openly you talk about racial dynamics, how comfortable you are in talking about structural racism, and naming race when it comes to interrupting patterns and bringing folks along in their journey is a marker of your effectiveness. If you're afraid to say race, and again, the heart of our work is around the intrinsic work around leadership and being able to even name race, say Black, say Latino, say, in an asset frame, meaning that it's our service model, it's not the problem of the students, that we have to improve something here. And so the second marker is be able to understand that we are the epicenter of the problem, and we need to change ourselves in order to change our organization.
Oh, my little researcher soul is just so happy at that whole data discussion that you had. Right. It underscores why leaders must understand data and how to use it. But I think that problem of practice and then being able to, quantify and describe that problem of practice and that root cause analysis, like all of that is part of being a leader, part of it being a leader doing this work, and trying to address racism and the systems, of racism and the impact that they have today. So I think that's great. And then followed up with, like, you do the work yourself and trying to figure out where you fit in, because you're the leader of the organization, or you're leader of your classroom, or leader of your community, whatever. But like, as leader, this problem is yours. And then even if you've inherited it, even if it came from other places, but you have to figure out how you're going to tackle it. So no, that's really great. I appreciate that. We have a few more people. We have Insun. Hey, Insun, how are you? She's joining from San Francisco, California, where a diverse community is at her core. And she's very interested in learning more about your research, and she's definitely going to check out your book. Yay!
Very
And
good. I'll
then
actually be in San Francisco next week. Be out there doing some work.
Good. I love the Bay Area.
Yes, lovely. Lovely this time of year.
Yes. And then Sheila Mary Koch, I'm going to go with it. She says, amen on that comment about the deficit mindset from educators. She's caught herself in that trap in previous jobs. And so, yeah, I know, I appreciate it. I know you said it twice and you can't say it enough. And thinking about being aware of whether you're entering a deficit model and blaming communities and blaming families for that. And I love that this idea of, like, what is your service model doing to address what is happening in that. And so that's, I haven't heard it said that way, but it's another way to present to people to help them reframe how they're looking at kids and looking at the performance of kids in their communities. So I love it. I want to I want to ask this question because it came up when we were talking before. But much of our conversation and in the book is written around school leaders and schools that are in the U.S. context, because that's where we live here. But even today, we have people who are tuning in from across the world. And I would love for you to share a little bit about your Global Institute and what you learned from convening educational leaders across the world.
It's been awesome. There was no expectation. We're a U.S. based firm. We had intention, because we know the U.S. education system, that we were intended to be here. I had no idea that would be a global text, but also then a global concept around anti-racist leadership. It's not until I got into conversation with folks in China, in the UK, in South Africa, in Brazil, in Australia, around their anti-racist journey did I bring into I mean, of course, I know that colonialism is a real thing, right? And colonialism is a global phenomena, right? And so, yes, there's impacts of racism all around the globe. um, and so for leaders to be able to come together from all these different areas with different histories in different countries to come together and talk around this phenomena of alleviating the oppression on their oppressed communities is a really powerful experience because a lot of the challenges are the same. In terms of understanding the dynamics of white supremacy in the global sense, but then also how do we work with compassionate curiosity, right? Not with shame and blame, right? Because working from a place of shame and blame and anger, right? Like we need to change other people often is counterintuitive to bringing people along. And so when it comes to compassionate curiosity, it's around learning about where these people are in terms of their racial identity development. Why might someone be turned off to the conversation? Why might they sit in back of the PD and like, I don't want to hear this because it affects me in some way emotionally? Why are these people disengaged and not wanting to get on board and learn about anti-racism, understanding that that's best for the kids that they serve, right? So by leading with compassionate curiosity and empathy, um, in a global sense, with individuals who have means of power to affect the lives of Black and Brown students, um, we find that regardless of your community or society, we're able to engage others, who aren't a part of the institute, and joining us in our journey and being willing to change their behavior because it's been presented with care and they've been engaged according to where they are in their racial identity development and held and sort of and brought in as a partner to be a part of the work.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that work and like the breadth of it. And I love that compassionate curiosity is something that I hope we can all bring to our work. The phrase um when you say it, it softens the approach, compassionate curiosity, but really is a great frame for thinking about how we, as you said, bring along people in this very important work that you're doing. So thank you. As the Remix EQ community knows, each episode is an opportunity for our guests to drop knowledge and to drop inspiration about how they make the world a more just place. And you've done this by sharing your anti-racist perspectives on your anti-racist leadership practices, how you've been engaging with school leaders and both at home and abroad. And so we thank you for that because your experiences and your expertise really add to our repertoire, but they also allow for us to have a more understanding of the people and places that you serve in your work. And that's something that really allows for us to do our work better. And so we would love for you to drop one more piece of inspiration. So Dr. Benson, what keeps you doing this work, developing anti-racist leaders in education?
I mean, what keeps me going is the gratitude that I see in individuals when they are able to realize change in their buildings, right? Folks who are committed to the work, folks who are dedicated to work, who've been in the struggle, regardless of color, who've been in the struggle, who've been going to workshops and conferences and working with different consultants, but understand that they haven't been able to move the needle as much as they do. And then when they come to us, of course, maybe at the end of the rope, maybe we're their last stop. Maybe we're like, oh, they're another stop. We're going to see what they can do. But then with our approach, they're actually able to realize change. And just a tremendous amount of gratitude in the hard work that we do because it ain't easy, right? There are often a lot of tears and trepidation and anxiety, and really helping folks transition from the leader they thought they were to an anti-racist leader. But at the end of the road, when the change has happened internally, but also within their organization, not to say that I expect the gratitude, but I appreciate it when it comes. When folks realize that all the work I've done for the past few decades hasn't been effective because I didn't do it with a focus on student outcomes. When that light comes on and I see it happen, I'm just incredibly grateful for what these leaders do for people that are members of my community. So that's what keeps me going.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I have much gratitude for you coming on to our show and sharing so generously your experience, your expertise. It was wonderful speaking with you on the show. We have another comment from Dr. Blanche Anderson. She says, I appreciate you using the term partners. The approach has to be different in love and like you where educators feel like they're partnering. And that's beautiful. It's a great comment. Thank you so much. So thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. You are welcome to come back at another time. If you are penning another book, or we can bring you on with somebody. Sometimes we have two people on the show with different perspectives to talk about the work, and so you're definitely welcome. We'll keep following the work that you're doing and supporting and amplifying it. So we appreciate it. Oh, we have another comment. From LinkedIn, a user. They're joining from Charlotte, North Carolina, and they decided to go back after taking on public school system as a parent advocate and being silenced on various levels, and now seeing how unconscious and conscious bias plays out in charter school while trying to advocate for and protect my Black children. And so she's trying to approach issues with compassion and partner with school staff to bring awareness to the necessity of this work. And she's hearing action planning and other terms. So, oh my gosh. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you. This is a space where we try to amplify the work and amplify the voices so that we can continue to learn from them. And then Eugenia, hi. She says, thank you both for the work that you do. Thank you for joining us again. We have some people just coming back. I love it. I love it when I recognize the person. It's great that you're tuning in. Well, I will be back on Friday, February 24th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern for another Remix EQ Live episode where we will visit community participation. So watch your feed, check your inbox so that you have the details to tune into the next show. And until then, visit the Remix EQ Live webpage for episode recordings and more information about our inspiring guests like Dr. Benson and upcoming shows, and discover new ways to support the Remix EQ community via donation and purchasing our Amplified notebook to write down all the thoughts and learnings that you have throughout the show and throughout the work that you do. We also have some upcoming events like the Remix EQ Seminar and a weekend work-along for planning inclusive evaluation for those of you in the Remix EQ community who are mission-driven leaders who do good work. So please check those out. And while you're there, please poke around my website and learn more about my business, Blue Knowledge, and our growing families of brand and services, which advances equity in schools and communities. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. And of course, I invite you to connect with me here in this space too. So thank you, Remix EQ community, for your engagement, your comments. You guys were bringing them in today. I appreciate it. Your encouragement, and of course, your rally. So this is how we recognize, appreciate, learn, love, and take care of you as you work to make the world a more just place. Yes, there's some more people chiming in. Hi, Marjorie. It's good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I am your host, Dr. Erica Tate, and this is Remix EQ Live. And I will see you next time.